Hey everybody, it's Aspen back again with another video for Ghouls magazine, and I am joined by a very special guest, Jerry Sampson.
Hi, Aspen. Hello, everyone.
Yes.
Thanks for
Hi.
having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. We are talking about Scream 1996 and Freaky 2020. So I wanted to talk about, let's first start with Scream, just for time period wise. So 1996, directed by Wes Craven, and we got a stacked cast on this film. We got Nev Campbell as Sydney, Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers, David Arquette as Deputy Dewey, Skeet Ulrich as Billy, Drew Barrymore as Casey, Matthew Lillard as Stuart, Jamie Kennedy as Randy, and Rose McGowan as Tatum.
Yeah, such a great cast. I'd say one of
Sure.
like the all-time best.
Do you remember the first time that you ever saw Scream?
I do, yeah. It was a pretty impactful watch. I mean, I think I was a sophomore in high school, and it was like a girls' night, and we did like a double billing of The Exorcist and then Scream. But by the time Scream came around, everybody was asleep except for me, and I can't fall asleep during movies. I never could. So I was just sitting there by myself, and it was really terrifying. Like
Yeah.
I didn't see the comedy in it at that point because it was just like, you know, just the setting was pretty perfect. And I just hated it. But shortly thereafter, I mean, it's steadily become like one of my favorite. And like I was saying, I watch it a couple of times a year, and oftentimes it'll just be on in the background while I'm writing, while I'm doing things, just
Yeah.
because it's such a reliable and just entertaining horror movie. It's
Yeah.
just you can memorize the lines and it'll still be classic and great.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I
Yeah.
definitely agree with you. There is, Wes Craven has a hand in revolutionizing horror over time, first with A Nightmare on Elm Street. Because we experience the kind of dull moments in the slasher genre where
Mhm.
when we got to Halloween, it was kind of like the big hit. Carpenter's Halloween was huge. And then we just started seeing like copycats of that
Mhm.
style of slasher. And over time, like once we got through the 80s, it was kind of tiring. Like we were asking ourselves like what more could we see besides your usual guy trying to kill people. And
Right.
so when Wes Craven came out with Nightmare on Elm Street, it was revolutionary for the time. It entered the supernatural. And so then once again, here he comes out with Scream,
Mhm.
with writer Kevin Williamson. And I think the him playing on his own experience with horror tropes in Scream is really what makes it successful. Is by this time in the 90s, people have seen so many horror movies and they know all of the formulas. And I loved seeing characters within a movie also know those formulas.
Yeah, it's always amazing to think about like the age that Wes Craven was when he did Scream, and Kevin Williamson, who was already kind of a master of writing teens,
Yeah.
but you still have like these two men who capture, I mean, Craven did it even back in Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
They really capture what it is to be like a teenager and what it is to be afraid. And, it's not like teenage years are that far off from adult years, but you're still in those years where nobody's listening to you.
Yeah.
And so when you're saying that something is happening, I mean, like Scream, there's barely any parents in it, obviously. Nightmare
Yeah.
on Elm Street, parents were the catalyst for a lot
Oh
of
yeah,
these
I know.
things. Um, and, it's just like that. It's just really opening up that world, I think, is which is why teenagers cling to these movies so much, is because, not every movie with teens in it actually feels like a real, fully developed story with fully developed characters. And that's just, I
Right.
think, what Craven has always been amazing at. And of course, Kevin Williamson is like the king of, the WB or
Yeah.
CW, whatever it is
Yeah.
now. He's created these characters that feel lived in, and
Yeah.
you can really see yourself in it. And I mean, at least I could. That was part of why I really connected with Scream. And Sydney is badass, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
he's
even the
definitely
adults
different.
are great. Yeah. for sure.
Yeah, she's different. I do want to touch on her for a second. She is a different kind of final girl, as well as Nancy Thompson's character in Nightmare on Elm
Mhm.
Street. Completely different from what we're used to seeing. Um, I think I feel like her trauma when we meet her, Sydney, um, of losing her mother and the struggle she feels with typical like teenage issues when they're talking about sex and like, does it feel like, she's being forced by Billy and the complete like bring around when she finds out that Billy is the killer, both of her
Mhm.
mother and of many other people, is just groundbreaking to me.
Mhm.
And really what makes her character the strongest.
Yeah, I totally agree. A lot of movies, especially slashers up to this point, it's pretty random. You know, it's your like if you think about your Friday the 13th or Halloween, no matter what's been retconned for Halloween, you know, it's a lot of like wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah.
You know, you just happen to be at the camp
Yeah.
when this guy comes back or when this guy's mom comes back, whatever. Uh, and then all the iterations after that. Whereas Sydney, it's like a very personal thing. And, Nancy is, it's similar, just thinking about like Wes Craven, he really seems to like that personal aspect. So it's not just you're this random girl that's like thrown into this horrible situation. It's you're a specific girl that is picked because of, for Sydney, it's her mom's past. It's a very personal attack. And it really kind of hones in on that idea that like who you know could hurt you the most kind of a thing. And I think that that's a part of what makes it so interesting is like we've all kind of been walking down the street at night, aware of the fact that anybody could come out of the shadows. But when you think about like you're in your home and the person that you trust and welcome into your home could be the person that hurts you, that's the thing that's like really impactful.
Oh
I
yeah,
think
for
about
sure.
Scream, and then all the iterations after, all the like 1 through 4 so far,
Yeah.
it's just all been about Sydney,
Right. Oh yeah, for sure.
which I love.
I love part two. Part two is probably my favorite. I don't know why. I don't. I mean, I love the first one, but part two is definitely up there for me. And then people really trash on part four, but I like part four.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I like them all honestly. I think three. Um, if you know about the industry at the time and what was going on, then you understand why three was the way it was.
Yeah,
But I think that the way that they came back for four and kind of adjusted it for the new generation that's going to be
yeah,
watching it, um, I thought they did great. I don't know. There's the gore was like amped up a little bit, and um, you know, I like it too. I like
yeah,
all of them. I have a
yeah.
very soft spot in my heart, though. I'm not as forgiving with other
Those
things.
are the things, yeah. Well, we definitely do look forward to Scream coming out in 2022. Um,
That'll be interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I hear a lot of the original cast is coming back. Um,
Hmm.
and we don't really know much, and I think that's what's really exciting. I feel like
Yeah. Yeah.
other horror movies, other reboots, you seem to know everything before you get there. um and so I'm excited. um I want to talk
Yeah. Me
about
too.
the satire. So I know when you watched it the first time you didn't really like feel the satire then, but after
Hmm.
watching it like for over a few years, how do you feel about this implementation of comedy mixed with horror?
I appreciate it. It
Yeah,
it works because of Kevin Williamson's writing. Like
yeah,
it's smart and it's not smart ass, and it's a movie that recognizes what it is. It recognizes that years have gone by where people have seen so many different plays on the slasher genre,
yeah.
and in that it's able to kind of look at itself and laugh at itself, and it lets you in on the joke. And I think that that's a really smart way to go about it, and it really did like revolutionize the new slasher movement.
Right.
And I think it's just if it were played less smart, if it were played more sarcastic,
Mm.
or but it was just very much like we're the kids here, but we know what's going on.
Right.
These rules have been in place,
Yeah.
and the people that are, the offenders, the violent, the killers also know the rules, and it's almost like
Yeah.
they're playing by the rules too, and so it's like a
Yeah.
everybody's in on the joke, but it doesn't make it any less scary, and it doesn't make it any less, uh, you know, smart, really. And
Yeah.
so I love it, and I got it, after I'd watched it a couple of times, and I was kind of like looking at it more as this. I'm so sorry. You can probably hear crows outside, huh? Uh,
It adds, so it's like the ambiances here.
yeah, it's fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just out there. Anyways, yeah, I really appreciate that, and I have seen other, like teen slashers kind of try
Yeah.
to mimic that, and they don't do it well because
Yeah.
they aren't thinking of it. I don't think that they're thinking of it from like a real movie lover, mindset. You have to really love horror. You have to really
Yeah.
understand, the people that love horror and appreciate it in order to really pull that off. And, I feel like, the faculty had a little bit of that too. There are certain movies that kind of came around the
Yeah.
time that Scream came out that also pulled that off,
Mm.
but most of them didn't. And I think that's a part of why
Yeah.
Scream is so like just withstood the test of time,
Right.
because it never gets
Yeah.
old.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of my favorite lines is early, like when Sydney gets the first phone call and he asks her, like, oh, what's your favorite horror movie? And she's like, oh, I don't watch that stuff. And he's like, why? And she's like, oh, it's just some dumb big breasted girl who's running up the stairs when she should be running out the door.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so, I mean, and it's so true. And I mean, like, how many times have you, just like as a woman that loves horror, like you watch some of these things and you're just like, give me a break. Like, you
Yeah,
just want, and then she does proceed to run up the
I know.
stairs.
Just her own
But,
stereotype.
yeah, yeah, which I think is even smarter because, it's not like she didn't try. And I think that
Yeah,
like what they're pushing back on is this idea that instincts don't kick in, because they
yeah,
do. Instincts would kick in and you try to get out the door, but when you can't, that's when you go up the stairs. You don't just automatically fall up the stairs, and so I think those things are what, just makes it kind of like a special little package. And I do think that the first Scream was the best at that. Like it
yeah,
really did that, this whole like the satirical, aspect the best. And then, from there they kind of played off of the first one's narrative in that way, which I think they did great.
yeah.
But I think the first one really stands out in
Oh
that
yeah,
way.
oh
But
yeah, for
also you
sure.
have like Matthew Lillard's comedy,
Yeah,
and Rose McGowan is hilarious. And I mean, the whole cast was amazing.
yeah. Oh, I love Rose McGowan's line when she's talking to Sydney, and she's saying like, oh, what if it really wasn't cotton? And she's like, oh, stop! You're starting to sound like one of those Wes Carpenter flicks. And I was like, oh, same.
Yeah, 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 totally. Totally. They just recognize, uh again, that's part of the making fun,
Yeah.
you want to see like a horror like that, and especially the fun, subgenre of the slasher. Like you
Right.
want to see that they're not taking themselves too seriously, because when they started taking themselves too seriously is when it becomes like way darker.
Right.
There's a place for these movies too, but it becomes a little more mean spirited. And
Yeah.
this, there's not like a mean spirited bone
Yeah.
in even through all the like horrific things that happen to Sydney and her
Yeah,
friends.
I know.
It's not mean.
I feel like the comedy really keeps it grounded in a sense of reality, because they are high school students, like, Billy and Stu are just, even in the moment, she's like, wow, you guys are really in and out of your head. Yes, they're stabbing each
Hmm.
other, trying to cover up, their own crime. And I think that
Hmm.
sense of calling back on horror tropes and the stereotypes is what keeps this grounded, and it actually shows um audiences like, oh, see, like this is what happens when people watch horror movies, but like not really, because there's
Right,
always been
right.
that debate of like, oh, people who watch horror movies are probably like psychos. And
Yeah.
I think it really puts that out there in a humorous way. um
Mm.
I love it, and I love Matthew Lillard as well.
Hmm.
He's great in everything. And
Oh yeah, no, he's obviously a favorite. just in general. And Stu, I mean, in that final scene is, I mean, that's still one of my favorite
Yeah.
final scenes in any, um, you know, at least slasher. And, you know, like Billy saying that, you know, horror movies don't create psychos, they make
Yeah.
psychos more creative. Like that is very pointed from the filmmakers being
Yeah.
like, you know, it's the commentary toward the general public who think, yeah, you must be psychotic if you're watching this. And it's no, like that's
Yeah.
not, this is like, you can't just have horror directors and writers come out and say, no, I insist, you know, we're not crazy. You have to kind of feed it in there
Yeah.
and you know, kind of show people, because for some reason horror has that, people think that, you know, you must be the really demented if you watch these things, but that's
Yeah.
not, you know, that's not the case. Everybody watches horror for their own reasons.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I just love, I think that that's one of the best kind of little things that's thrown in, as a commentary on that,
Yeah.
that idea.
Yeah.
And of course
Yeah.
it's like the most famous quote from
Yeah, I know, right?
the movie.
Yeah. Oh, I love Billy's use of we all go a little mad sometimes.
Yeah.
This it's that just amazing use of research, right? Like they're
Hmm.
treating the horror movie formula as their guide, right?
Hmm.
And that feels like hard to do, right? You know, you're taking little pieces of everything. And in the same sense, that's what Wes Craven's done with Scream, is taken little bits and pieces of every single horror movie that he's ever made or every single horror movie he's ever
Hmm.
seen, and he's created something completely new that no one's ever seen before. With
Yeah.
that added fun of like, oh, I know what that's from, or I know where I've heard that before, and I think that's really an important thing to see, you know, and it's what keeps people coming back, and not telling themselves like, oh well, I've seen everything, you know, I've seen every supernatural, I've
Hmm.
seen every slasher, and that's what I love about Scream, is that it's still timeless.
It really is. Yeah, the references go back far enough that it doesn't feel dated ever. I mean, some of the clothes might feel a little dated, but that's about it. You know,
Yeah.
like other than that, you, if you have, any kind of a knowledge about, you know, the horror industry and horror movies, then you're gonna love it. And even if you don't, it's just like a fun, fast paced,
Yeah.
well done slasher. You
Yeah.
know, so it's like you don't have to be a horror fan to like it. And this is a great way to appeal to non-horror fans, you
Yeah.
know, because you have stars. This is like, this was definitely that time. You have the Drew Barrymores and the, you know, Courtney Cox, who was just like getting famous from Friends and everything. And, you know, you can see that it's not just to make money. This movie wasn't
Yeah.
just to like pull in people, you
Yeah.
know, which is how it sometimes feels nowadays.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But it really is meant for, you know, horror lovers and not
Yeah.
like, and everybody can enjoy it, I
Yeah.
think.
I love Sydney's last line. You know, when Randy's over her shoulder and he's like, "Oh, watch out! You know, this is the part of the movie where you know the villain comes back." And you know, Billy does rise, and she
Hmm.
shoots him, and she's like, "Not in my movie." And
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
love this sense of, I feel like it's really hard to do a theme of like a movie inside of a movie, or even just
Hmm.
calling back to something like that. I feel like that's really hard to achieve because, you know, film, people say like film takes you out of your own reality and puts you into a world of escapism. And Scream really rides that line of giving you excitement and escapism, as well as like keeping you within reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the way that Scream, as opposed to other franchises, um, like Friday the 13th or Halloween, it has that through narrative, you know, that's kept, it keeps building on its past and it keeps referencing, you know, I mean, like
Yeah.
in the gun to the head is, you know, is what happens every time. That's basically
Yeah.
the only way that she can kill, which is absolutely absurd, of course. But in
Yeah.
her movie, that's how she knows they're dead. And you know, it just feels like a different, unique thing all on its own that you can put Scream in the slasher subcategory for sure, but it really feels like it is kind of a step above, because it's
Yeah.
not just every movie is, you're thrown into a new situation with the same bad guy. And
Right.
this time, these movies, you're thrown into, it's always Sydney with a different bad guy. And, it really, like, as the movies go on, it builds on her trauma.
Right.
It builds on how she moves past all that.
Mm.
And that's another thing that feels very grounded in reality. She's not just okay, but she's also not absolutely destroyed and she can't
Right.
live her life, and I think that that's
Yeah.
something that Scream, the entire series, does really well. And I think that's something that I can give the third Scream a lot of credit for, is when
Right.
she comes back, like, that Sydney feels um like she's worked through things, and that she's tired to the
Yeah.
point of, like, I'm not scared anymore. And I
Mhm.
do think that that, like, is very grounded in reality.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
as a woman, I can say that, since we're always tired and
Always tired of everyone's bullshit.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to touch on this the who done it, right? So this is like
Hmm.
Wes Craven's take on like mystery, like mystery meets, thriller slasher. And the reveals every single film, I'm usually really shocked by them. Um especially part 2. um
Hmm. Yeah.
but yeah, like what's your take on this, the who done it, right? Like where you're not only feeling scared throughout the movie, but you're also asking yourself, well, who is it then,
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I think it's a brilliant format, when it's done right. And for Scream, the fact that everything is kind of all it all draws on Sydney's mom, and her past there, and how everything builds on that, um, until we get to 4, when it kind of takes a little bit of a turn. But I think that the way that it's done, it's it's like it's mysterious enough, everybody is suspicious enough,
Yeah.
and it really, like, amps up the tension, I think, because in Scream 2, Sydney can't trust her boyfriend,
Yeah.
because she has, Mickey there saying, like, oh, he seems like kind of, a little
Yeah.
suspicious. And you have
Yeah.
people, and she's feeding off of her past experiences, being like, well, I can't trust anything. And then when it's somebody that you don't even expect,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't even think of it, it's just it's a cool mystery, without ever losing its horror,
Mhm.
because these are two
Yeah.
completely different, genres, but Craven somehow manages to kind of put it
Yeah.
put it together really successfully, I think, in almost all of them. Um, and I'm trying to think of, like, other movies that have tried to do that, and I'm not doing a very good job. Like, maybe Urban Legends, that was kind of a slasher whodunit sort of thing,
Right.
but you're not as invested
Mm.
in the characters necessarily. I think that was kind of it was in the same time frame. And while I do love Urban Legends,
Yeah.
um, it's not as, like, character driven. And I think it's the character driven aspect that really digs into the mystery genre of it,
Right.
because you're getting to know these characters, and you're saying, like, well, how could this person possibly hide this?
Yeah.
And when it's revealed, like, it might not always make sense, or might not
Right.
always track if you kind of, like, look at it narratively, but it's always exciting.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I definitely
Yeah.
love that it's especially in the first one, that it's two people, right?
Hmm.
You're, because of the ghost face, costume, you're not really getting any features.
Hmm.
Even though Billy and Stu are like quite of a height difference. Um
Hmm.
but I love that, she, like, when Sydney's running through the house and she sees Stu and Randy coming up saying, like, no, he did it, he did it, he did it. And when she is like blindsided really by
Hmm.
both Billy being alive and it being him, and then Stu helping him, I think it's just
Hmm.
one of those, like, it's a twist within a twist. And I think
Hmm.
that's what makes
Yeah.
it so exciting.
Yeah. That, and I mean, in that moment, like talking about tropes and stuff like that, one of my favorite during that reveal is that she wasn't a virgin anymore, like that she
Yeah.
had literally just lost her virginity and Stu points
Yeah.
that out, you know. And it's like, well, now you can die because you're, and
Yeah.
it's, so it's like, not only are these guys two people that she really trusted and, you know, trusted Billy enough to kind of go against her instincts
Right.
in that moment, but then they turn it around and use that against her,
Right.
you know, as a trope. Now you're, and so like this whole, the whole reveal moment was so funny and but also, yeah, like shocking and in a way that I had never seen before, you
Right.
know, like it's, and I don't think, I think that that's a part of why, another part of why this movie just like stays in, you know, the lexicon of slashers and is
Right.
so high up on the list, because you just, it's always kind of a surprise and you can always look back and think, you know, I mean, like Ghostface in his costume, he hunches, right? Like he
Yeah.
does a lot of like hunch running, and so little things like that
Yeah.
that kind of lead you away
Yeah.
um, from ever really knowing or guessing. Like I think that that's what makes mystery really good,
Right.
and also just the fact that anybody could be the killer. Like I know that they did, like they've had to fight so hard through all the movies to keep that secret, you know,
Yeah.
like who
Yeah,
the
for
killer
sure.
is or killers are, which I think that shows how many people care, I guess.
Yeah. I totally agree. I want to touch on one last thing before we move on. This will kind of lead
Mhm.
me into Freaky. Um, I think one of my favorite things about like Ghostface in general, like whichever one it is, doesn't really matter, is that he's not invincible. Like I love seeing the scenes where he falls, he trips, he gets stabbed, he gets punched. And that's
Mhm.
completely different from like, your Michael Myers who does get hurt, but has this very stoic. I love when Michael Myers like sits up after having just been stabbed, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And I one of my favorite things about Ghostface is that it's clumsy. It's
Mhm.
clumsy in a humorous way and even in a scary way because it feels like, oh well, I got him, but now you didn't. And he's gonna keep getting up. Um,
Mhm.
I think it's just the humor in that clumsiness is what makes it more scary for me because when you
Mm.
think I'm trying to fight somebody off, but they're still coming.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it is, again, this is why I think Scream is so it's more realistic. Like it is a slasher, but it isn't like, you don't shoot these guys in the head and then they come back. And in reality, you can fight off, like as Sydney is, you know, what, a 5'5", you know, 120-pound woman. She can fight these guys, and she can hurt them, but they, you know, they're also bigger than she is and stronger than she is. So she has to fight a little bit harder. And
Yeah,
the fact that they aren't just going to keep coming back and back. And then in the third one, the only reason that he comes back after getting shot all those times is because, you know, he's wearing a bulletproof vest. And so, you
yeah,
know, like that's like one of the first times that we really have seen that, you know, the the bad guy, this stalk and slash
yeah,
killer, um, this is why he's still alive, you know.
yeah,
This is why he's not invincible. He's gonna die, which again goes right back to the only way you can kill him is the headshot, you know, kind
yeah.
of the zombie sort
Mhm.
of get him in the head sort of way. Yeah, but I love that too. I think that it adds something different and it grounds it in reality again, you know, like you if you look at Stu,
Yeah,
he's like a lanky, tall dude. He walks silly, kind
yeah,
of, you know, like lankily, and you could see him falling downstairs.
yeah.
Like if he doesn't,
Yeah, sure.
like I couldn't see him not falling downstairs
Yeah.
if he gets pushed. And you know, I know like the spoofs, like the scary movies, they really,
Oh,
you
yeah, yeah,
know,
yeah.
touch on that because it is kind of silly to
Yeah,
see this dude or you know whoever is under this costume just like tumble down the stairs.
yeah,
It's really funny.
yeah,
um and you know they always get up until they're dead, and I just think that that's a part of the fun,
yeah,
you know, of the whole thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's again not taking itself too seriously.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with you, and that leads me into Freaky because Freaky has very similar humor. Um,
Mhm.
so Freaky is came out in 2020, directed by Christopher Landon, and writers Michael Kennedy and Christopher Landon as well. Also, not a very big cast, but I love Vince Vaughn and Catherine Newton. So Catherine Newton is Millie, Vince Vaughn is the Butcher. We have Cecily O'Connor as Nyla, Misha. I'm totally gonna mess up his last name. Um, Osherovich, I think, as Josh, which is the two best friends. Uriah Shelton as Booker. Uh, Dana Dor I'm totally gonna mess up their names again. Dana Drury as Charlene, and Katie Finnerman. No, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry about names. I'm really bad at names. Uh, Finner N, yes, I think, as Coral, which is her mom and her sister. Um, it's body swap, right? We got
Yeah.
body swap slasher, and I think feel like Vince Vaughn was the perfect person for this role.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, he doesn't play it funny, and he's such a funny guy. Like
Yeah.
in general, that's how I know Vince Vaughn at least. He's just that funny swingers guy, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, and he plays it really scary. Like he's when
Yeah.
he is starting out as the butcher, um, and he doesn't play funny. Like he is this hulking mass,
Yeah. It's like
very
6'3", I think.
much
Yeah.
Jason. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He plays it like the quiet, stalker.
Yeah.
Um, and that's why like when they swap, it's so funny
Yeah.
because then he kind of can get into his sort of just like it's very strong bodied humor, like
Yeah.
he's in the way that he moves. And again, like Catherine Newton, right? Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah, Catherine Newton. The way that she transforms herself, I thought
Yeah.
it was really fun. I don't think it like says too much beyond, I don't think that it like really broke huge barriers or anything like that,
Right.
but it was one of the more fun like slashers that I've seen in a while, I can
Yeah.
say.
Yeah. I know you said that you didn't like it the first time you saw it. Why?
I did not like it. It
Yeah.
was more like I was trying to figure out who it was for,
Right.
basically. I watch a lot of horror
Yeah.
all day, every
Yeah.
day.
Hard to keep
It's my
up, right?
job. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there has been a little bit of a shift
Mhm.
when it comes to the more studio horror movies,
Right.
where I'm not sure who it's for exactly,
Mhm.
and it's not like a negative judgment on it. It's just when I'm watching it, I feel like maybe this is like for a younger crowd. Maybe I'm just not getting. I don't
Yeah.
know. That was like a little bit of what went through my head, and then the second time I watched it, I came around on it.
Right.
Because maybe I was in a better mood.
Mhm.
Maybe I
Yeah.
was more in a mood for
Mhm.
a horror comedy, which is really, I think, where it settles into
Yeah.
pretty nicely. And then I kind of really could appreciate the gore more. Like it is a
Yeah. It
really
is real
gory
bloody.
movie. Yeah. And some of the kills are really inventive. And so I just think that I was probably in a little bit of a better mood. But I mean, I do still think that when studios have a bigger hand in some of these movies,
Mhm.
the kind of the tone can get a little bit lost.
Yeah.
Um, but again, the second time I watched, I really enjoyed it, and like I have it, and I'll probably watch it
Yeah.
every couple of years just
Yeah. Just
revisit.
revisit. Yeah. I
Yeah, but I
totally
really do love the Freaky Friday the 13th thing. Like I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah,
a great
so
idea.
Freaky does similar to what Scream is, and it's kind of not necessarily using the horror tropes as part of its narrative, but has a lot of callbacks to,
Hmm.
horror that we've seen. Like Friday the 13th by using the dates. which I thought was interesting. Kind of threw me off at the beginning to myself. And the opening scene is crazy.
Yeah.
I was probably the most shocked the um at those deaths. The wine bottle
Mhm.
in the throat. That was mad.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, breaking the tennis racket and
Yeah.
sticking out, like, as a horror writer, screenwriter, I think you're a
Yes.
screenwriter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, like different creative death ideas go through
Yeah.
my head all the time, and when you
Same.
see something on screen, yeah, it's just like there, always kind of spinning around. And when you see something that's really cool on
Yeah.
screen, like give it props because that's, I mean, however you feel about the Final Destination franchise, you can't say that those people aren't sitting in their writing rooms and being like, what's the most messed up way we can kill
Yeah.
these people? And I feel like Freaky, I feel like Michael Kennedy and Landon really leaned into it, and
Oh yeah.
I really appreciated that. Yeah, that opening scene was great, and he was very much like a Jason. He didn't
Yeah.
talk. He's just doing the little Michael head tilt.
Yeah.
Lots of those kinds of callbacks. And again, this is another movie that feels like um, these guys really love horror,
Yeah.
and that I really got on the more on the second time around, because it does have some of that supernatural stuff that didn't
Yeah.
always track with me,
Oh
but
yeah, for sure.
yeah.
The Dola. um
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely a part of it, but it not necessarily was it needed, but it was something that didn't need further explanation.
Yeah.
Because it was simple enough to understand. Um I love it kind of reminds me a lot of Jennifer's Body. Diablo Cody is an amazing writer.
Hmm.
But the lot of those lines that they have in Freaky, that are just it's just that weird kind of like cynical humor that
Hmm.
feels like something that you wish you could say in public, but like if you did, somebody would be like, "What the heck?"
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the like allowing, I mean, again, these kids really sound like teenagers.
Yeah,
And it always like amazes me when dudes write people well like that,
yeah.
like when guys
I know
write
you're like, wow.
teenage girls well. Yeah, I mean, I give them credit, like good on you. But these kids sound like kids now.
Yeah.
It's very updated. It feels very like what you would hear
Mhm.
in a high school right now. And I think there is a lot of that kind of dry, cynical
Yeah.
humor in teenagers,
Yeah.
and sort of that we're already adults kind of a feeling,
Oh yeah, for
like
sure.
they like we already know everything.
Yeah.
And I think that really lends itself well to, even though her mom is a little more involved in this. Usually these movies don't have a lot of the parents around. um, Her mom has like at least a little bit of a place in it with the weird like romance kind of
Yeah.
angle with
Oh yeah, in the dressing
the
room.
butcher. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
funny. um and in that, like, she's also dealing with,
Mhm.
this is another girl dealing with the loss of a family member.
Right, yeah, this is
But
kind of
this
the
is much
reverse,
less
yeah.
personal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
definitely less personal. It has a lot to do with just like her confidence, right? Like she
Hmm.
which I think is I don't know if you watch the honest trailers of like the
Hmm.
movies. Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
love the part where they're like, "Oh, where all of the jocks and the popular people are mean to her because she's hot."
Yeah.
She's not actually
Yeah.
like nerdy or like she yeah. Um
Which is classic teen movie anyways. Like that I think even in itself is a little bit on the nose of the whole like, oh, put your glasses on and your hair up and you're the nerd, and take your glasses off and the hair
yeah.
down, you're not, like, all she
Yeah.
had to do was
Yeah.
put on like a leather jacket and some
Yeah.
lipstick, and then she's
Yeah.
hot. But it's not just that, it is
Yeah.
like the way that she carries her body
Mhm.
once he is in her body, which is a really interesting thing too, because confidence of a strong man,
Right.
in the body of this like this
Yeah.
like girl.
Yeah.
Uh, just imagine if we all walked and
Yeah.
exuded that kind of
I
confidence.
know, right? It definitely has like gosh, who is it? I totally slipped my mind right now. John Hughes. It's got like
Mm,
John Hughes classic 16 Candles kind of vibe.
for
And that was
sure.
like one of my favorite things, like this Pretty in Pink, like her whole room is feels like when somebody goes back home to visit their childhood bedroom.
Hmm.
That's kind of what it feels like. And then her friends are even they're it's nice seeing minority characters who are actually like solidified, and it's
Hmm.
not one of those especially um oh my gosh, Josh, especially Josh's character, as the
Hmm.
queer character is actually solidified that he is queer, and there's no question about it, and he's confident in that, in who he is. um Versus where most movies will play with the queer aspect, just like, oh, it's not really there, it's an undertone, overtone.
Yeah, or it'll just kind of be thrown in as a see, we're putting this
Yeah.
character in, like
Yeah.
I mean, it's happened in a lot of, kind of teen movies or teen horror movies, just sort of throwing a minority character in just to say that it's this person's there. But that character, Josh, is one of my favorites
Yeah.
because he's funny, and I loved that the two friends, once she is like the butcher, they believed her
Yeah.
eventually. It wasn't just like this whole she's by herself, and obviously that would have been a completely different movie.
Yeah.
They believed her, and then having this dynamic between this adult and these two kids, like
Yeah.
it just felt really fresh
Mhm.
and different, in
Yeah.
that aspect of it. And there's a lot of those moments to where like it's not a very scary movie.
Mhm.
There aren't a lot of scares. There's a lot of great kills, but not a
Yeah.
lot of like tension. But I
Mhm.
think that's what puts us in pretty strongly in like the horror comedy
Right.
arena, to
Yeah.
where there is the gore, but me personally, I wasn't like tense
Yeah.
or like
Yeah.
worried for the characters necessarily.
Right.
But there's places for all those things,
Yeah.
and
I love
none of
I love
them
his line when
died.
he I love his line when he comes into the theater and he's like, "It's a slaughterhouse."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of those great one-liners. I mean, obviously the writer, um, and I guess both of them together, they work really well together. It's
Yeah.
just there's some really funny like laugh out loud,
Yeah.
and then again Vince Vaughn's physical comedy
Yeah.
and the way that he holds himself
Yeah.
is just really great.
The portrayal of 6'3" Vince Vaughn playing a teenage girl. Um,
Hmm.
I I never would have thought that that could work.
Yeah,
And he just does
and it
it
was never like
so
played
well.
like a joke,
Yeah, no, not
like
at
or
all.
perverted.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was never like this is gross
Mhm. Yeah,
because this,
especially in the scene where, um, Vince Vaughn as Millie is talking to
Mhm.
Booker in the car. Yeah, and
Mhm.
at my first time viewing it, I was like, "Where is this going?"
Yeah, yeah, they went. I mean, yeah, that was pretty funny. And I really feel like throughout they both kind of learned a little bit about each other, which is really
Yeah,
funny because the fact that the butcher in Millie um like learned something about himself. It didn't change. Like he's still
yeah,
this psychotic, but he learned something about what it is to be a teenage girl.
yeah,
Saying like he hates his body and he's so weak.
yeah,
And he had to figure out ways to use his brain, which
yeah,
is a classic, like, in horror, because
yeah,
women are weaker just naturally,
mhm,
physically, we have to use our brains more. And
yeah,
that's another reason why I love like female killers too, is because they
yeah,
can't rely on their brawn just to bust through people's chests. They have to like actually
yeah,
get creative. Yeah.
yeah. I totally agree with that. I Another one of my favorite lines is the butcher as Millie. It comes back to school, and like she's wearing the leather jacket and is all cool, and Ryler pulls her aside, and she's like, "Oh, you're gonna tell me some information," because Ryler's the
Hmm.
school journalist.
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better term. And she goes in there and she tells her, "Look, I didn't come in here to clam jam with you." I just, I could, as as a
Yeah.
queer woman myself, I was like, I
Uh,
am totally stealing that one.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that I know that Michael Kennedy is a gay man, and he's like, you can get like just the way that his dialogue plays out throughout all the characters, but especially in those moments, it's
Yeah,
just it's like biting and sardonic, and it's great.
yeah,
Which I really think, just goes plays right into the fact that we need to hear other voices,
yeah,
need to have other writers writing this dialogue so we can get something a little different than
yeah,
just your regular old white dude
yeah. Classic white dude.
voice. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
How do you think, because from 96 to, because I would say Happy Death Day maybe started the resurgence of slasher. So like 17 to 2020, from 96, it's about a 20-year gap that we haven't really
Hmm.
seen maybe a successful slasher since Scream. How do you
Hmm.
think movies like Happy Death Day and Freaky have changed since 1996?
Yeah, well, we went through a pretty dark time
Mhm,
during those years. Um, like, I don't love using the term, but I always have to because it's just the term, but like the torture porn years
mhm,
where things got really, dark and kind of mean, and
yeah,
there wasn't a lot of levity to, and I know that there were, there's things like Sorority Row that came
yeah,
out. And no matter what you think about Sorority Row, that particular one,
yeah,
it had some of that, like, and like the Black Christmas that was in the
mhm,
aughts. Um, those, it's like they were trying to kind of capture that sort of
right,
bit of meta, bit of funny
mhm,
mixed in, but it was all very, very dark
mhm,
and kind of heavy.
yeah,
And I think coming around to like Happy Death Day to You, which wasn't my favorite, or Happy Death Day, that was my favorite
mhm,
of the newer releases. But again, I don't love all PG-13 horror. I am definitely
yeah,
one of these people. Like my
yeah,
horror, I'm a little more like this is why I really liked Freaky,
yeah,
because they give me gore when you're
yeah,
also giving me like quippy
right,
one-liners. That's what. Um, but that's just my personal take on it. I think you can really see the changes just in the past like few years in these
right,
movies in how like people are represented, different people are represented, and um some things remain.
mhm,
You still have like the main girl is still
right, yeah,
pretty white girl.
yeah,
um so that, like, in the same thing with Happy Death Day,
mhm,
like there are these things that feel very baked in,
mhm,
and nobody's questioning those certain things,
right,
and thinking like, well, it could bring like a whole different aspect if you look at other people in these roles.
right,
um but it's the side characters
mhm,
now that they are still side characters,
mhm,
but they are being given actual like roles.
right,
They're being given things to do instead of just,
support.
who was yeah, who was Sydney's friend? Was that in Scream 2? It was Haley, or no, not
Oh,
Haley's the leader.
gosh,
Uh
I can't remember her name.
Maybe it's Haley. I don't remember her name, but you know who is
Yeah,
like
yeah,
she, she's just there to be sassy, the sassy
yeah,
girlfriend. You know
mhm,
what I mean? And that was it.
mhm.
Like, she offered a little bit of comfort and then a little bit of
Right, like she turned into
don't step
the
over it.
like emotional support
Hmm.
friend.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And not the let's figure this out and solve things together. And that's what I think Freaky did really well. Is like, it
yeah,
wasn't just these characters are there to make us laugh. It was like, we're going to work to
yeah,
figure out together. So it became less of about her and more of
right.
about them. And I think that that is something that's really special about this movie in particular. I don't know about Happy Death Day, because that was really like her kind of
Yeah.
story and what she was working through. And while it was a slasher, it was uh, I don't know, it didn't stand out quite as much to me, and it also had this kind of like supernatural bend
Yeah.
to it. So I don't know when the last time was, besides the aughts, that we had like a slasher that was just pure stock and slash,
Right.
kind of like uh, maybe I'm
Probably, well, no,
misremembering.
not even Fear Street.
Right, no, because there is some supernatural stuff to that too. I
Yeah.
mean, you can definitely say that later Friday the 13th, and maybe you can say that Michael Myers has supernatural bend, but
Yeah.
just like taking the strict slasher,
Yeah.
genre, like I just think that the only real way that it's changed, in my opinion, is giving other people a bit of the spotlight, within it, and letting them kind of do their own thing and be their own person and help instead of just
Right.
being on the sidelines. But also little things like at the very beginning of Freaky, the the sexual kind of aspects of it. It's very much more like you go girl kind of thing,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
like the girl. It's like, I don't have time to service you, and she just walks off.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I feel like those little things are just trying to be like,
Mhm.
see, we're updated.
Right.
For,
Well,
maybe
I
I
even
should
think
say.
something like that is still playing on those on the formula, right? If you have sex, you die. If you drink, you
Mm-hmm.
die.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to see how the movie opened and then who our protagonist was, which was obviously somebody who, doesn't drink, doesn't have sex, right? Like, and neither do her friends,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, um, interesting to see. And I think you're right. I think the youth, like the youngness of these characters and their form of comedy is kind of what is clashing with, and I think that's why it needs that supernatural aspect in a way,
Mm-hmm.
um, because I think over time you sit there and you're like, kind of like what we were talking about with Scream, like, oh, why would you run up the stairs and not out the door? In
Mm-hmm.
this day and age, it's like, well, my sister's a cop. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I totally agree. I think you kind of have to adjust, also just adjust what younger people will believe in a movie or want to
Right.
see in a movie. And you know what I mean? It's like maybe we've just kind of moved through this subgenre, and people want to see more,
Mm.
characters take, like, I mean, I think since Scream, people want to see that strong character. And of course,
Yeah.
Nancy Thompson's strong character, but it's just like different once
Mhm.
it hits Sydney, like
Right.
Sydney's actually fighting back against humans, like actual
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and she's physically engaging. And then uh Millie, she's physically engaging when she's a man, when she's
Yeah.
in a man's
Yeah.
body, but then once she gets out of it, she still like works to overtake this real person. And I
Right.
just think that maybe as the years have gone by, people just want to see different things. Maybe
Right.
people don't want to see just somebody running through the woods for, you know,
Yeah.
an hour
Mhm.
and running away. They want to see more banter, and they want to hear,
Yeah.
like, have funny scenes, like her tied up to the chair in Josh's, is Josh right?
Yeah.
House. And when his mom
His
comes
mom comes
in,
in, yeah,
and
and she's like, "You are many
I thought
things,
you
but
were.
straight is not one of them."
Yeah, like those things are funny. And yeah, I just
Yeah.
think maybe that's just what
Mhm.
it is now. Like, you
Yeah.
you want that comedy really mixed in, and you want these characters to all be able to come out alive.
Mhm.
Me, I like
Right.
to see people
More than
die,
one
but I
person
also like
living.
to see, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, but I like to see these people like be able to get out and kind of move on.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want a Freaky too, please don't
Oh yeah,
Don't
no,
make this a
definitely
franchise.
not. Please.
Please, I'm begging. You know, which I do think that's another thing that is
Mhm.
a lot of times that's like I feel like Happy Death Day could have just
Mm.
been one movie, but because they
Yeah.
made so much money, classic franchise, but like at least Scream
Mm.
had a story to tell.
Right.
It continued to tell this story instead of just rehashing.
Right.
You
Well, it's
know.
definitely one of the just like, film industry issues is the dollar sign. The
Mhm.
dollar signs definitely speak louder than story can, and this especially with Nightmare on Elm Street. That was the first horror movie I ever saw when I was a kid.
Hmm.
I don't know why, but
It's a good
then
first.
over the years, you watch all of them, and I'll never forget when the remake came out in 2010.
Mm.
My gosh, I was like, why is this in existence?
That's that's always the question, just like a big why.
Yeah,
That's what I always come up against. It's just like why we didn't need
why we
this.
didn't need it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me come back, bring us back into our last topic before we run out of time. Um, do you think it's overkill? Considering sequels, reboots, and the subgenre as a whole, um, do you think maybe it's overdone? This stereotyped group of teens, man or woman killer and large body count.
Um, when it's done right, I don't think it's overdone.
Mhm.
When it's done wrong, I'm like, enough,
Yeah,
and maybe that's like a unfair answer, but when the genre is done well and when the story is there and the characters are there,
yeah,
give it to me, like
right,
inject it. But when it feels like it's pandering, or when it feels like they're just like, how are we going to get kids in the theaters, and then I think like there's so much original
mhm,
IP out there,
right,
and I know this because I watch a lot of indie
yeah,
horror, and I see it. I see new ideas, new monsters,
mhm,
new, bad people, real people. So like the stereotypes, the tropes, the cliches are there for a reason because they've kind of worked.
yeah,
It's a fun part of this, of like the slasher.
yeah,
Um, I don't think that we should think about it too much
mhm,
that, if you lose your virginity,
mhm,
you get killed, or if you have sex, you get killed. That's just like, that's not a saying anything. It's just like a fun part of this
right,
particular genre. And then,
mhm,
what Scream did was turned it on its head, and
right,
that and reinvented that to where you can die if you're the main character, you can die if you've had sex, you can not die if you've had sex, you know. But like any good recipe,
yeah,
it's lasted so long because people
yeah,
like it.
oh yeah,
And then when, I can respect people that try to reinvent
mhm,
things, even if they fail, in my opinion,
right,
like I can still respect trying something a little different,
yeah,
while still maintaining, the format.
mhm,
I do think that reboots and sequels and all this, uh, I don't think it's necessarily like, I don't think it's super necessary.
right,
I can say, like, I
yeah,
mean, I like the Halloween, the new Halloween. Look at how many times Halloween has
yeah,
been remade, and good on them. They
mhm,
keep going strong. I love Jamie Lee
mhm,
always and forever. And if she wants to do things, for the rest of her life, she wants to play Laurie Strode, go for it. But it feels, it doesn't feel like, doesn't feel exactly, it feels different, it feels like
yeah,
they're kind of pandering a little
mhm,
bit, and then they keep going with it, and so
mhm,
then I know that they're not doing it for the love of
right,
Halloween, they're doing it for the love of like money.
right.
That's just my
Oh
personal
yeah.
opinion on
Yeah,
it,
definitely it's
you
nice
know.
to roll around in the nostalgia, I I like that feeling, but yeah, no, I agree with you. Sometimes the sense of nostalgia is not necessarily um
Hmm.
worth the time, really. Um so last but not least, but with those upcoming releases, like you mentioned, we got Halloween Kills coming out this month, next month. We got
Mhm.
Halloween Ends in 2022. We got the I Know What You Did Last Summer series coming out, the Chucky series coming out, and the new Scream 2022. What
Mhm.
do you want to see next from the slasher subgenre?
Like out of those,
Well, those were just the
or
ones that are coming, but in general, I yeah,
I want to see. I want to see the next iteration of Your Next, which is one of
those is
my
one of my
favorite
favorites. Yeah,
slashers, of all time, and um, that for me was its own sort of indie reinvention of the subgenre, and I would like to see another, you know, one of those, because that was like I don't want to see Your Next two, but I
mhm,
want to see somebody else's vision create something new. At the same time, I am pretty excited about the Chucky series.
yeah, same.
Uh, I'm not looking forward to the I Know What You Did Last Summer series, because I watched like a couple seconds of the trailer and it looks
Yeah.
very watered down.
Oh yeah.
And you're watering down like an already pretty watered down
Oh yeah. Watered down movie.
movie, even though
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I
again
do love that
like
movie, but
that's yeah, but I mean if you water it down even more, I don't know, it just looks like Gossip Girl for like I Know What You Did Last Summer. But
yeah.
yeah, I want to see other people's, I want to see new, you know, ideas from directors that are going strong right now in the festival circuit, you know,
Right.
like Alex Noyer and Jed Shepard, like who just you know, he did the Host movie, which was supernatural, but
Yeah.
like there's a lot of people that have an immense amount of talent that I think have new ideas.
Right.
Um, you know, your ideas and my ideas. Like
Yeah.
I want to see a space for
Yeah.
new instead of just a retread of the old, because they know that fan service will pull people in.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
like
Well, and that's one of those great things about horror is that the fans really fuel that genre. Um,
mhm.
and yeah, I want to hear your ideas too. I want to see our movies, on the big screen. Um, so, one of these days, and
No, for sure.
hopefully soon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of
Well,
course.
thank you so much for joining me today and talking about these two movies. Why don't you tell everybody where we can find you on social media or any of your other work?
Yeah, well, I am on Instagram at The Sleeper Must Awaken, and that's where I do a lot of kind of chatting with people.
Yeah.
I love, I don't, I'm not on Facebook or anything, but there's something about Instagram that really brings creatives together for me. I'm on Twitter at Lady Scriptwrit. I'm on there. I'm not very, you know, quippy or
Yeah.
so I don't do great at Twitter. I have a book of short horror stories out, and you can find those on my website, which is jerryjsampson.com. And
Awesome.
I also write for Ghouls and Rue
Yes.
Morgue and all kinds of different places.
But thank you so much for being here and speaking with me. Um, so that's it for today, ghouls. Aspen signing off. Stay spooky.